Welcome, everyone. So, welcome to the session in labor tracking. Today, I'm Debbie Oberbellig, and I'm program manager and coach and founder of Successview Coaching and Consulting Company. And we have a couple of great speakers today, specialists in labor tracking. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far and have been able to connect. I understand that speed networking is really fun, and there'll be another session at 1:10 this afternoon if you weren't able to join this morning. And before we start and I introduce the panelists, I just like to let you know that we will have a Q&A session at the end. It'll be about 10 minutes long. And so you can put your questions, if you're in the Zoom app, put your questions into the chat, and I'll be monitoring questions to ask the panelists at the end of the session. Or if you're in the Whova app, there's a ask a question portion at the bottom again. So either one will work and will come to me so that I'll be able to ask the panelists. So would you like to increase your accuracy in manufacturing, run and setup times, calculate efficiencies by employee, and track indirect labor costs and measure productivity and efficiency by time period? Who wouldn't, right? Labor tracking will do all of that for you and more. And our panelists are going to talk about that today. So I'd like to introduce Akhila Tadanada from Zimelgo. She is co-founder and CTO of Seattle-based smart manufacturing company, Zimelgo. They offer turnkey industry 4.0 solutions to manufacturers. Prior to co-founding Zimelgo, Akhila led engineering teams at Hitachi that worked on building and launching industrial Internet of Things platform. Akhila grew up in manufacturing in India, and her dad was an executive at one of the largest power companies there. She has a deep passion for manufacturing space and wants to translate all of her learnings from tech into real value for manufacturers. She also is a mother of two lovely daughters, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and she believes that parenting and running a company are both helping her enhance her leadership skills as she tries to navigate new challenges coming her way both at home and work. So welcome, Akhila.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you. We also have Daniel Hawkins. Dan Hawkins is the regional manager in the Pacific Northwest for Valence, I hope I said that right, Valence Surface Technologies, the largest aerospace metal finishing company in North America. He also worked for and supported numerous other world-class manufacturing firms in aerospace and has a background overseeing large budgets as well as leading teams to achieve goals they did not think were possible. That's awesome. Over the course of his career, he's helped many manufacturing organizations grow their sales, cut costs, and compete in the market. When he's not working, he's an accomplished landscape photographer and college professor, and he teaches his students how to learn and see. His work is shown at Seattle Art Museum sales and at the Rental Gallery. So with that, I'd like to ask our speakers if they'd like to join us.
Awesome. Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. And so Dan and I thought maybe a good use of our time today was probably like a fireside chat where people can actually hear from the manufacturer, which is Dan. And we worked with Dan for a while now, and he's probably the most knowledgeable and visionary person that I've met in this space. So my thought was I would actually ask Dan some questions, and Dan can then answer those, as that would be the most relevant to the audience here today. So I know Debbie sort of mentioned a little bit of your background in manufacturing, Dan, but if you wanted to sort of dig deeper into all sorts of manufacturing, from machine shop to everyday manufacturing that you worked on, I think that would be helpful to the audience just to understand your background a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So, my background, my entire career is in manufacturing. I started working in manufacturing as a teenager in a little weld shop in Mason County. And, aerospace came shortly thereafter. I realized that, I didn't want to work on trailer hitches and boat trailers. I wanted to work on things that were going to fly. So I've been in space for about 30 years. And during that time, a lot of that background is in machining. Specifically in pushing automation as far as we could possibly push it in machining. So that includes robotics, that includes cell manufacturing, that includes common tooling, and also innovating a lot of different machining practices to reduce cycle times, to reduce costs. A lot of that's also in 5-axis hard metal. So, I've seen a lot of trends come and go, and, a lot of different technologies applied to try and cut costs and try and gain visibility in the factory. And I think it's a really exciting time. My current role is in metal finishing. And one of the distinctions between metal finishing and machining is there's a lot of human hands. And so I have a lot more in common with Burger King and Brown Bear Car Wash as far as the types of costs I'm trying to track and the types of challenges I'm facing than my old manufacturing background. And so with that, that's kind of what's brought us together, you and I.
Yeah. And we'll definitely go into more details on that. So Dan, I think the first thing, even before we started working together, when we met the first few times, what inspired me when I was talking to you is your understanding of data, or your understanding of Industry 4.0 and how that can be applied to everyday manufacturing. So can you maybe just like at a high level talk about, how you talk about the data funnel and what does that mean for manufacturers today?
Yeah, so, on the front end, right, at one of the most basic levels, many people in manufacturing are having their employees clock in and out of jobs. They start the job, they clock into the job, the time starts, and they have them clock out. And that's good data. There's a lot of it. It can be messy. There's all kinds of silly little things that trip us up, shift change, who puts in the part count, these kinds of things. How do we distinguish between setup and runtime? But these are solvable issues, and many people have attacked them. One of the things about this set of data is that it's one view, but combining it with other views, like is the machine running, is the heater on, is the part moving? This is all very, very interesting, right? So in my machining background, I started to want to answer questions like, when is the tooling arriving at the machine? When does the cycle start? And even further, pushing down further to ask questions like, okay, the machine is in cycle, but when is it cutting? So we started eliminating non-cut time within our machine time, which was another breakthrough. So just a lot of different data. In order to cut that cut time, I actually had to go to machine simulation software and start determining when the cutter was engaged in the material and when it wasn't, and attack that next. So it's just a lot of different data sets. And really what I was seeing in the landscape is a lot of people would use a single tool and then kind of be done. RFID was a good example of that. A lot of people used it for inventory management, and I began using it to track my tooling for the machines. But I could see that there was a lot more possible if we started crossing these data sets. And I could see that was over my head. Right. Taking big data and crunching it and filtering out extraneous data, that is not my background. And so I've worked with a number of different tools and different folks and different teams, internal and external, to try and attack those problems. But I found that very few people that really understood what I was trying to do. The amount of noise that they found acceptable was just not acceptable. Right. So that's really kind of my journey, and what's led me to today.
Yeah. And I think just to add on to what Dan was saying, I think this is definitely what I found was visionary, but I think we also want everybody to start thinking like that, where you're asking those questions and then, you're not stopping at, oh my God, yeah, I can't answer this question today. There's probably something out there which can answer that question for you. And I think with you, Dan, you're always like, I have this question, let me find who can find the answer for this, right? You're always sort of looking for that. But I think that's what we tell the manufacturers that we're working with is don't start technology up start question down. And once you know the questions that you're trying to answer, you can then actually start to figure out what data sources do I have, how do I collect them, and then how do I answer those questions. Yeah, and even the first time that I met you, you had like 10 questions. It was already there in your head, and you said, here's the 10 questions that I need answered about my factory, and then we need to figure out how we're going to answer these questions, right? And I think that's definitely the right approach for anybody who's considering Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing or whatever you want to call it, is start with a question. Yeah, so I think that was great. And then Dan, you briefly touched on this, that at Valence, which was previously MapsCo, you guys actually started using RFID. And it's funny because the first time that Zimelgo started, and we would go meet anybody and they'd be like, so is this like MapsCo? Like, are you guys doing what MapsCo did? So it was definitely like, state of the art that everybody talked about. So yeah, maybe if you could just talk about, one, what did you guys do? But then two, like, why did you even choose to go on there where nobody else was even investing in that technology? This was like early 2015, right? That you invested in this.
Yeah, so I mean, MapsCo had a question, pretty basic question: where are my work orders? And just to put it in perspective, they usually have a couple thousand jobs in work, and their turnover is 7 days on average. So very fast, and about 25,000 SKUs. So, high mix, high velocity, low volume, recipe for disaster. And if you lose a job and add a day to your turn time and your competitor doesn't, you will fail. So the simple question, where's my work order? At the time, the state-of-the-art technology, which is giant boxes, giant RFID boxes that look like they're out of the Terminator movies or something. The state-of-the-art technology at the time, was to put up an array of antennas and put RFID tags on every work order, which definitely solved that problem and is very exciting. And at the time was pretty state-of-the-art, but IoT was happening, and we were about to move into a new phase. And so, what a lot of the metal finishers told me when I was their customer was, we can't automate. We don't have data like you guys have. We can't do the things that the machine shops do to lower their costs. Right. And now I'm on the other side of the fence, and I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I actually think that there's plenty of opportunity to do it. And I also think that other businesses and other industries have solved similar problems, probably not in the way that I need to solve them, just because of the incredible mix that I have. But there are some promising paths or whatever that have been blazed by people before me. I just think that the opportunity is there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think just to hit on that, like, so now we work with a lot of customers, and we definitely at Zimelgo, our goal is to make this as turnkey and as widely available as possible. Maybe not state of art anymore. Like, anybody should be able to track their work orders. And I think what we realize again and again is people don't realize how much time they spend looking for stuff on the factory floor. Like, it's the first time you introduce that, you're like, yeah, it couldn't be that much. And I just talked to a customer yesterday, and they have done this amazing, analysis. And they said it actually costs them, for people to just go enter time into the system is $300K per year for a mid-sized manufacturer, just to enter time in the system, not looking for things, none of that stuff, right? So a lot of people don't realize, we're not, and if you add up all of that, you're easily talking $1 million, even for a mid-sized shop, just losing time tracking tooling, entering time, copying, keeping track of time, keeping track of where things are. Yeah, so which is why I think it's definitely one of those cutting cost things that doesn't occur to mind super quickly, but the minute you start tracking it, you realize, oh my God, I'm just wasting so much time. So I think, Dan, you sort of mentioned that, but what were the challenges that you had, maybe implementing it, but then also like evolving the system, right? Which is where we started working together.
Yeah, I mean, some of the challenges with that system and with the implementation really are just related to people, right? So making sure that people are putting the stickers on, making sure people don't interfere with the antennas, making sure people look at the data in a timely manner and scrub it. all of that stuff. And then, even further back down to time tracking. I mean, it's very expensive to have people clocking in and out of jobs. The cost to have them go away from the job and basically enter data is great, but also that data is not the best. I mean, unless you're scrubbing that stuff constantly and retraining your people constantly to understand how you would like it entered and when you would like them to switch tasks, you're just not getting good data. One of the things that really I'm very interested in is I want to know when people aren't working on a job. How long does it take to get from one job to the other, and why? Well, that's usually the one thing that manual time tracking doesn't give you. That's what you don't know. You can't really study the gaps very well. So that's another challenge. And we also had technology challenges related to interference and, trying to get more granular if I want to know whether something's on a specific table. Well, it so happens that I work in a building made of metal that's full of metal. And that's not the greatest environment for antennas, it turns out. So that's another piece of the puzzle.
Right. Yeah. And I think then now that you've mentioned sort of the problem statement, Dan, I can sort of talk about how we then started working on this together. And the great thing has been we are co-creating this, right? So we're working with them, we're on site, we're testing together. But basically what Dan said, I think two things changed from 2015 to now. One, the cost of RFID has gone down significantly to the point where we can put a box under each desk and it's not price prohibitive to do that, right? You're not talking like $20,000 readers that you have to put under each desk. We're talking $700 readers that go under each desk, which is almost like putting a check-in and check-out system. I think the second thing that Dan mentioned, which we realized is what the earlier system was doing was it was collecting the data, but it was stopping at that point of time, right? There was no algorithms that were put in to understand, oh, this is good data, this is noisy data, this data needs to be combined with that data. And that's really where the second phase of IoT comes in, which is what our team is able to do, is not just look at the data, but then also make the data intelligent by actually applying algorithms to it. And then say, okay, I see this thing here for this much amount of time, and this, is probably interference. And that's, real data. And now let's combine this and say, how long is it taking to do a particular job? Which is what Dan is saying, is already, if you think of Amazon, if you think of all these high-end retailers, they're already applying machine learning. They're already applying, algorithms to figure out, their placement, how their robots are going to work. If any one of you has a Roomba, if you use, right? I mean, Roomba is beautiful technology. It's using sensors to figure out which directions it should go in and computing those algorithms in time. So it's just that nobody has used the same sort of ideas and applied it to manufacturing. But now that we're working together, we're now able to take all of those learnings and apply that here, right? So for the end user, it's really just, I'm starting the job, I'm on this table, I put my work order, the clock starts for them. They take the work order away, the clock stops for them. And Dan was pretty clear from the beginning, this has to be as seamless as possible. We cannot have people clocking in and clocking out. So we made it very, very seamless where they just come in, put their work order, take it out. But then behind the scenes, the software is doing the magic, right? The software is doing the magic of taking this data and making sense out of it. So a lot of times people ask me, hey, why now? Like, RFID has been around forever. Yes, RFID has been around forever, but I think it's the cost and the software, which is really changing the game here. I don't know, Dan, if you agree or want to add something.
Yeah, for sure. The cost of the readers, also the sensitivity of the readers and their adjustability has changed dramatically just from a consumer side. I definitely don't pretend to understand the technology going on, but I know that they do things that I wanted them to do 10 years ago, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And so that's very exciting. And their simplicity and size is another. They look like little tiny wireless routers, basically, which that's great in a shop environment. I don't want sensitive pieces of electronics failing, and causing me headaches. So that's another piece of it. And then, like you said, yeah, the software is essential because there is a lot of data coming out and we have to make sure we get the right pieces of information. What's exciting about that is when we started working together, one of the things I was very focused on is I don't want people to click on a button and put in their name and put in the time of day and then end the job and then click on another button. I already have that. That doesn't do anything for me. I want a system that's passive, that I don't do anything, they don't do anything. All they do is go to their desk and they work, and my system begins collecting time and it reports it up to me, and that's all there is to it. So that is extremely helpful. I think a lot of times with technology, it's very tempting to say, oh, that's a small obstacle, it's not that big a deal. But as you said, when you scale it up, it costs millions of dollars and it makes it less accurate. It just does. So that's really what's exciting about what's happened with the hardware and the software.
Yeah, agreed. So Dan, maybe we can just get into a little bit more details in terms of your vision, as that might apply to other people here. I know we're talking about right now, we're working at the masking station, but we also have ideas about the paint booth and other things. And the reason I'm bringing that up is, your approach has always been, this can be done and here's the options, right? Versus a lot of people may be skeptical thinking, hey, I don't think this can be done because my shop has XYZ problems, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's interesting about Valence is, if we work in an area of the shop, that solution will probably not apply to other areas of the shop. So, the masking time tracking solution, that will not help me in the paint booth. It will not help me in the chemical line. Won't help me in the lab. There's just so many different areas of the shop, and all these areas are feeding each other parts. So level loading and scheduling becomes even more critical. So as we develop these different areas, we find that there's different data sets that are available or potentially available, and different data sets that would be valuable. So we currently have work order tracking. Combining that data with the time tracking at the table is a double check. And it also tells me other things that I don't know the answer to, such as after a job is complete, how long does it take to get to the other area? I can find out how long it takes to start,
right.
But if I want to know where it is in the shop, that's a different question entirely. And that data is available. So I can start asking questions like, how long does it take? Why does it take so long? Is it adding to the queue time? Is it adding cost to the job that I don't need? So that's one area, one department that's high touch. In other areas of the shop, they are more automated. There's little labor and a lot of machines doing things. And so we can tie that labor tracking data to the actual equipment and do typical kind of PLC monitoring, where we decide, what the indicators are that the machine is actually running. And we can drill down into that, to understand both where's the work order, when does it arrive in the area, who begins clocking into it when, and when is the machine running, and is the machine loaded? I mean, there's just all kinds of things that are possible with that combination. And similarly in my paint department, so I have painters that are inside the booth. The booth is full of carcinogenic chemicals, so I can't go in there and observe them. It's not safe. They're in full respirator gear. But I want to know things. So, whether the oven's on, whether the oven door's open, where are the jobs, what jobs are they working on, how long do they take to spray? But I can also answer other questions like, how much paint are they using? How much paint is going through the gun? Is air going through the gun? So I have a little pneumatic sensor that I'm hoping to use to capture real-time data to know whether they're spraying or standing. So all kinds of possibilities exist to cross-reference this data. And like I said, I know what I want, but I know that I don't have the ability to sift through that massive pile of data. So that's really what I rely on Zimelgo to do for me.
Yeah. And I find all of this so exciting. And you mentioned you just bought that pneumatic sensor off of Amazon, and that's the cool part of it. Like, you don't really need to go out of your way to find these sensors now. They're all just available. It's a matter of harnessing that data. While you were talking about this, Dan, I just something came to my mind, which we talked about initially. A lot of times people are concerned about cultural change, right? Oh my God, I'm going to start tracking people. What does that mean? How are people on my factory going to respond? And I know you guys have a great culture down there, right? It's all about innovation, but I think it might make sense to talk a little bit about when you are trying to do some of these state-of-art things, how do you go about managing the cultural change?
No, that's very important. So it might be surprising to hear, but actually with my management team, usually it takes about 10 minutes to think of how we want the data to come. I mean, it's like a very short conversation, like this is what we want. That's simple. And then we give that to you guys, and that's the hard work on that side. But the rest of our conversation is, what are we going to tell the crew? What are we going to tell the crew this is for?
Yeah.
What are we going to tell them as far as how we're going to use the data? What are the layered rollouts that we're going to do to make sure that people don't feel like it's going to make them look bad, or it's going to reveal things that they don't want us to know? And it's not because our people are malicious, but it's because they're human. And we really carefully think about each department, each supervisor, and then their groups, and make sure that we craft a rollout that's going to be positively received. We also agonize over the naming of things. So we want to measure time not on a job, and we're still debating what we're going to call that. Time off task, or dead time, or gap time, or we're in a serious discussion about what we're going to call this, because we want people to understand why we're measuring it. We're not measuring it because we think our crews are malicious. We're measuring it because we want to eliminate it. And we're crafting messages that make it very clear to our crew that when they are not able to log into a job, we consider that our fault, that we have failed as managers, and that we need to present them with just endless opportunity to stay in the stream and adding value. And that when that isn't happening, it's because we put the table in the wrong place. We didn't get enough tools. We didn't make it clear. We don't train them well enough. Whatever the answer is, whatever the root cause is, that is with us. And so that is a very difficult message to craft, and it takes care. It takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, the first thing is it comes down to why you want to do this, right? Like if that's not clear, even for the management team, then you can go down a lot of different paths. But yeah, I like, initially when we met too, the way your team was looking at it, and not just you, like everybody in your team, is like you said, to reduce inefficiencies, because the people on the floor, like the painters, they are artists. They are there, they're making sure that, they're doing this perfectly. And if you're taking time away from them to do work that they actually don't enjoy, it's mundane stuff, or they're having to go look for tools or look for parts or things like that, then yeah, you're not allowing them to do their best job. And particularly for the daily or the hourly workers, right? Like if they're getting paid hourly, they might actually be doing their job and getting paid for that versus for things that are just inefficiencies in the system. Yeah, and I love that, because I think that's really what Industry 4.0 is all about, is about removing inefficiencies in the system. A lot of times, this happens to us, like we go on site, we install readers, and people are like, so are you eliminating my job? I'm like, no, I'm making your job better, right? It's not like because machines came in, people stop employing people, right? You still need extremely skilled people. And I think having a good understanding of that in the management team, so that they can then communicate that down. And honestly, once people on the floor see that, oh, I don't have to do this portion of the work and I can just do my job, they actually appreciate that, right? Because it's taking away that inefficiency from them. I just remember this example. We have a automobile customer that runs 6,000 jobs a week. And they said if they had to go look for a job, it usually take them 2 weeks to look for a job. And now that they have RFID, they just take these handle readers, they go, and then within 15 minutes, they can find, a particular job. And he said people just love that, right? So initially they had one. Now every supervisor wants a handle reader. So they went and bought like a handle reader for all of their supervisors, because people said, I'm not going to spend 2 weeks looking for stuff. It's just a giant waste of my time. Yeah, so that's why I really wanted to touch on that, because there's definitely, like, technology is there to solve the problem, but without the cultural change, it really means nothing.
No, that's right. And, there's a few components to that message that we kind of package up when we talk to our crews. One is that we're in a very competitive environment. So there's 15 companies in the Pacific Northwest that can do some of what we do. And so at every all hands meeting, we remind our employees that our customers are free to choose whatever shop they want to do these services. And so in order to win that work, we have to earn it. The second part of that discussion is, with the management team behind closed doors. And, when we implement something like this, we explain to the managers that this tool is not to identify bad actors. That is not what this tool is for. And that may happen as a side effect, but it will be rare. And if that is really what you're using this tool for, you're misguided. You're on the wrong track. The tools are actually to understand where you're failing as a manager and where you need to grow. So the weight goes on the manager, not the hourly employee. The hourly employee works inside the environment that we create, and we're responsible for that environment 100%. So taking that ownership and making clear to the management team is another really important component. And then the third component is, with the hourly employees, not only are we in a competitive environment, but we also want to know who's the best. We want to know who the employees are that are the best, and we want to know where the ceiling is. And if you just throw 14 people into an area and one of them's doing twice as much work, which we found that some people are twice as productive and have good quality. It's shocking. But if you just throw 14 people in an area and they all make about the same amount of money, that person's doing double isn't going to keep doing double. Why would they? And the person that's doing half, why would they move? I mean, they'll just continue to do half. And maybe they even want help, but no one comes and talks to them. So who cares? Obviously, my boss doesn't care. He's not here. So the data allows us to speak with people very clearly about what we see and what we value. And we also are very humble in the fact that when we talk to our hourly employees about data, we know there are nuances. And so we don't sit down with them and say, this data is absolute and this is the only view of your performance. Maybe they take a little longer on the jobs because they do all the hard jobs. Okay, let's bucketize those jobs. Let's understand which jobs are the hard jobs. Let's see if we can make the hard jobs easier jobs. Let's see if we should spread out the work, or maybe you should keep doing the hard jobs. We talk with them very openly about those things and about how we view this data. So, really that frank communication and that quick feedback and having a playing field where everybody knows how the score is kept, it's a totally different environment. Then there's a clear path up, there's clear raises, there's clear leaders. It's nice when a couple of people know they're the number one producers. You can see people treat them different, they feel different, and that's a good environment. So data helps foster that.
Yep. And then I know we sort of have probably 5 minutes. So Dan, I wanted you to talk about what are the future uses. I know we've talked about business models and other things, that can change. So yeah, if you can just talk about what do you see as the roadmap here?
Yeah, I mean, do you mean for Valence specifically?
Yeah. I guess let's talk Valence specifically, and then we'll talk about the industry as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for Valence specifically, we're moving our way through MapsGo, Valence, Seattle, and deciding how to track costs and track time by part, by employee, by area. So that's very exciting, obviously, and that's quite an endeavor. Like I said, every area is completely different. And once we have a good map of how that will work for the factory, I'm going to roll that up to my Everett site. So I have another location here in the Pacific Northwest, Blue Streak Finishers, Valence Everett, and we will implement up there. But beyond that, we've actually, inside of Valence, discussed very deeply how we will roll this out to other sites. And again, there'll be care taken there to make sure that we can get people in the boat and make them successful. But the vision is that we would go across all 11 Valence locations. We recently did an acquisition in Philadelphia area, and we have a new Valence member, so we'll be integrating them into the company shortly, and this will be part of that. So coming with our own MES, coming with our own time tracking solution, we hope to offer the new Valence members tools that they could have never dreamed of, really, that they would have never developed, and adopt the best practices we see within the shops we acquire.
Yep. No, that's awesome. And I know, Dan, even in terms of the data, you were talking about brown bear and similarities with that. I know you've mentioned like once you have this data, it's not just internal operations, but then also like, pricing. You can look at dynamic pricing. You can look at a lot of this, which you really can't do today because you don't have the data to figure out, oh, if I bundle these parts together, they're more efficient. Or if I do these two process streams together, they're more efficient. But the minute you can start looking at that, you can actually start to come up with better business models in general.
Yeah, that's right. So we also picture feeding a great deal of information back to our estimating team in real time about how the jobs are performing. And we would like to be able to determine when we have different crew mixes, if there are impacts there. So it's not just about individual contributors, but we suspect, just like in any other endeavor, like you think of sports, right? You couldn't just throw all those players in a bag and shake them up and they'd all have the same performance, right? I mean, they're on a team. And so actually we could sift through that data and determine when our best and most efficient teams are in work, and play with that. But the other, pieces of the puzzle would be, I would love to do dynamic pricing. I've often thought during slow times of the year that I could offer discounts and increase my volume. So November, December in aerospace typically is very slow. Maybe I would even find that I could actually do a Thursday discount. It would be very interesting to know this, or discount on the 17th of the month, whatever it is. So, most of my background has been in contract manufacturing. So you're not able to play with your prices. You're not able to play with what parts you make. You make the parts you make, and you're always winning new contracts. But Valence is different. Valence is outward facing, and we actually have the opportunity to do things to affect the work. So I've been, very interested in things that Burger King and Walmart and other customer facing businesses do to change their volume and to level load. So those are things that if I have the data available, and I should say when I have the data available, I will be very interested in pursuing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, so I think final question, because you're always thinking 10 years ahead, having known you. So if we were to fast forward 5 years or 10 years for the manufacturing industry, where do you think things should be or should go to?
Yeah, well, for aerospace, it's kind of interesting. So I've always said that aerospace does what automotive did, but slower, and 10 years later. Automotive is always ahead of us. They are way out on cost cutting and on efficiency, and many of the great lessons have come from automotive manufacturing. They're high volume, so they do get some things out of that we don't, being high mix. But there are many takeaways that have come from that side, and really IoT is one of them. I mean, they're ahead of us. They're flat out. And where I would see this going would be that, yeah, I would have dynamic pricing. I would have clear data that is passively collected about my employees, their location within the shop, when they are actually engaged in jobs and when they are not engaged in jobs. And I would also have a data set that would be flushing what I would call losers. This constantly flushing losers up to my management team. Like this part is costing us way more than it should, and we're not charging enough, or this part is costing us way too much, and we need to get way better at it. We need to get a lot more efficient. I'm very used to that data coming at me in the machining environment, and I miss it very much in the finishing environment. It's very hard to obtain. We do time studies. We actually do stopwatch time studies out there with our stone tablets and figure out how long things take. And I really look forward to a few years in the future where I don't have to ask these types of questions. The other thing is we have many theories about how the WIP in our factory flows most efficiently, and I have no way to validate this. The only way I validate it is at the end of the month, I get the P&L, or I look at the weekly snapshots, and it either validates the assumptions or it doesn't. But that's a long ways from hard data. I'd like to have very hard data about that, and we would be able to experiment with how we would like to move the WIP through our shop to find out what is the most efficient. So that's really where I see us heading, and where I think the aerospace manufacturing community is probably heading. I would also say layering together 3 or 4 different data sets should be much more common in 5 years. I see very few people layering even 1 or 2 data sets together. Like I said, as far as whether, is the oven on, where are my people at, what job are they working on? Those are pretty simple set of questions, but I don't see that out there. And so in 5 years, yeah, I think that should be a much more common type of data.
Yeah.
So Dan and Akhila, this has been a really interesting conversation. We have a couple of questions from the audience, and I wondered if I could present those to you now.
Yeah.
So Akhila, this is directed to you, and what the question is how do you see labor tracking fitting into Zimelgo's system for a small shop like and this is from Randy King, he says at Hours at Northwest LED.
Yeah. Hey, Randy, good to see you here. So Randy is also a customer of ours. And I think, Randy, like Dan was mentioning, I think for every shop, it doesn't matter how small or how large. At the end of the day, I think because Northwest LED is also a very high SKU count environment, similar to Valence, everybody wants to know the actual cost of what it is taking to build their job, because only then do you know if you're making a profit or a loss on each one of them, right? And today there's a little bit of estimation going on, and the goal eventually for us is to power all of you manufacturers with the data so that you can actually then figure out how to cost or price these accordingly. So it is and like Dan said, you can play with these things at that point of time. Like once you have data, you're not you have the comfort to say, okay, even if I go down, $5 on this one, I know that I'm going to make up in terms of volume because I know what my actual cost is. And I think in the 4 years of doing Zimelgo, this is one question that comes up again and again and again. I've talked to furniture manufacturers in Tacoma, metal finishing shops. We're working with Sekisui Aerospace on their composites. It doesn't matter what type of industry that we go to. I think everybody struggles with what's the true cost on the job. And of course, if you were to ask people to put in their true cost on the job, it's always going to be very, very time taking. But the minute you can actually start using other mechanisms to collect this. And again, I think there's going to be an evolution. There are going to be some companies that are going to go completely automated, like, Dan is, and then there are others who are going to go semi-automated, and sort of there's going to be an evolution. But I think data to me, and which is why, what Dan says makes so much sense to me. It's really about empowering manufacturers with data, and data which is useful, not noisy data. Because I think for a long time, there's been a lot of noisy data which they cannot make a lot of sense for. So if you can get more data on operations, I think then every single manufacturer can make better decisions. And Dan, if you wanted to add something to that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the labor tracking aspect of it, I mean, I think everybody wants to track their labor. Everybody wants to know how much things cost, and everybody wants to know where they can flex. Usually on this, I start from a very simple question. So if I pick a SKU and I tell you that it's going to double or triple or go up an order of magnitude in volume, do you know if it's a good or a bad thing? I will say in full transparency that there are parts where I don't know if that's a good or bad thing for my company today. And that keeps me up at night. I don't like that. And nobody else should either. So really, yeah, we can't settle on that.
Dan, I have a question for you from the participants, and that is, what information, as you've gathered information, what information went counter to what you expected?
Oh, probably all of it. So one of the things I've told Zimelgo every step of the way is that when you present this data, I expect that there are so many things that I do not know, or that I thought were a certain way. It's actually more common than not. And that's what makes it so valuable, because, I have my whole management team telling me like, oh, this is the best kind of work. We love these jobs. And then we'll get data and we'll find out like, actually, these are not that great. these are, mediocre, or they're even losers. Or actually, one of the biggest surprises is usually once you start time tracking your people, everybody will say, oh, Dave, he's the best. He does the most jobs. He's the fastest. And then you'll look at the data and you'll find out this really quiet person that doesn't talk at all is actually your number one producer. Or you'll find out that Dave's great, but he actually has a lot of quality rejects. There's all kinds of stuff that happens that, is just jaw dropping. So I've had a couple real shockers, but most of it related to specific parts that everybody is a fan of, or specific people that everybody's a fan of. I mean, we're just all full of bias. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And the data helps us sort that out. you know.
That's awesome. Thank you. Akhila, have you heard any comments from customers in that, along that same lines?
Yeah, I think Dan captured that beautifully. It's, initially when we started working at Zimelgo, a lot of people would say, my gut says this department is running delayed, right? And don't get me wrong, I think there's value to gut. Gut is essentially, years of experience that people have built up over a period of time. The problem is only if you've been in the industry 30 years can you build that gut check. But for the new generation that's coming into manufacturing, or the new people that are coming on board, they don't have that gut check. So then how are you going to help them run operations as efficiently or even more efficiently than what has been done in the past, right? So I think it's also a workforce retention thing. It's not just, how do we run it efficiently today, but how do we make manufacturing ready for this next generation? How do we make it, for lack of better words, exciting for the next generation to come on, where there are tools that they're used to in their daily lives, and when they come in, they're like, oh, I can check the status of my factory on my phone. They should be able to do that, right? So I think it's definitely, about making manufacturing more efficient, but it's also about making it more forward facing.
Thank you both. It's amazing. Your collaboration sounds like it's extremely successful, and it's really exciting to hear about all the things that you can do, and the people in the audience want to say thank you for the great insights. Do you have any last thing to add? We have about 4 minutes.
I'll let Dan add.
Yeah, I guess the takeaway for me is just don't settle. I love getting my first no. So I ask something, usually my managers are the first people to tell me no. And I just eat that for breakfast. I mean, I'll get a dozen of those before I get to what I want, but I don't settle. And then the other piece of it is that we're in a super exciting time, and the cost of these things is dropping quickly. We're basically in the smartphone era of IoT. And so, the possibility for creativity here is vast. There are a number of ideas that haven't even been thought of yet that are going to change manufacturing. So I would just encourage people to investigate the tools, investigate the players. Before I chose Zimelgo, I talked to a bunch of people that didn't get it, and told me no, which that doesn't work. So there's just a really exciting landscape out there, and I'll just close with what I tell every crew that I've ever run. Every factory has the opportunity to be the best, world class, number one. Every four walls. We all have the same equipment. We all have the same tools at our disposal. Every factory has the chance to be number one.
Thank you both. That's a great ending thought. You've done a great job, and we really appreciate it. And to the audience, if you could fill out the evaluation link for the speakers at the bottom of the Whova app, you can also ask questions and ask to be contacted so that you can get more detail if you'd like. Just add your contact information to it. We have like 2 minutes left. Is there any last thing to add? Either one of you?
No, I think this was, I've talked to Dan a whole bunch, but I think this was also good. Just for, and like Dan said, I wholeheartedly agree. I think I will leave with one thought, which I sort of talked to everybody about. I have this colleague, his friend has a factory in China. And again, this is not trying to scare people, but it's a clothing manufacturer. And he said, and it's very manual, there are tailors who are stitching, and it goes to another step. They're doing customized clothing and stuff. And he said that entire factory is set up with RFID. They know exactly when stitches were put, when a collar was put, when something was put. Every single workstation is, there is RFID. They know when exactly people start working on it, who's working on it, how long it took, and then it goes to the next step after that, right? And the reason I mentioned this story is that's really the competition. The competition is not the next door metal finisher. Yes, that is your competition right now, but really the competition is global right now, right? And there is, I've been to Japan, I've talked to companies in Germany, in my role at Hitachi, looked at companies in China and India, and people are investing heavily in these technologies, right? People everybody is competing for what's the lowest price to do this thing, right? So in addition to like what's the best way to do this thing. So a lot of times I meet manufacturers who are thinking, you know, maybe 5-10 years down the line I can start looking at this stuff. Probably not. I think you need to start looking at it right now. And you need, I think the big thing is to start small. Like start small, pick your why, and then start experimenting. And then minute you do that, there's something else that's going to come out of it. But then just sort of waiting for another 5 or 10 years, that clothing manufacturer in China is going to figure out what else to do in that 10 years, right? So I think I would just encourage everybody. Even if you're not ready to deploy anything, just start learning about it, right? And I think that's going to be very, very important in the time to come.
Thank you again. We'll wrap up our session. Both did a great job. It was fantastic hearing from you both. Thank you, Daniel and Akhila.